Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'll be sharing a story with you. The movie begins with a man riding his horse-drawn cart to a French home. He enters the home of a woman, Madame Requin, and drops off a little girl with him. Her name is Therese, and the man is her father. It turns out that Requin is his sister. The man had just lost his wife, and not knowing how to care for Therese, he figures that the best thing to do for her is to drop her off with her aunt. Requin has a little son, and she tends to him. Soon, Therese takes over the duty of tending to a young sick boy who is about her age or slightly older. His name is Camille. Years later, Therese grows into a young lady who still tends to her cousin as he is still sickly, and as a young woman, she gets attracted to a farmer across the field and starts using the nature around to ease herself and make herself happy. After her walk, she receives the news of her father's demise, and her aunt announces to her one day at lunch that she will be getting married to her cousin Camille. Therese is shocked and doesn't like the idea of marrying her cousin. For starters, he is sickly, and she is not exactly attracted to him, seeing that she has always looked at him as her cousin. However, none of that matters as he recently got a job in Paris and plans to go over there with his mother and cousin turned wife. They soon get to Paris where Camille begins his job and his mother sets up a store for her tailoring business. Therese, on the other hand, is an errand girl for her aunt and her husband. Her husband offers her no affection as much as she tries to create a romantic home. He rebuffs her desires and refers to her as his little Therese. One day, Camille returns from work while his mother and some of her friends play a board game. He comes along with an old friend of his, Laurent. Therese locks eyes with the better-looking man and almost immediately develops an infatuation, although she acts as if she hates him. Laurent is an artist and also works in the same firm as Camille. One day, he decides to paint a portrait of Camille. As he does, he asks Therese not to leave the room since her shadow has been captured in the painting. At the end of his work, the portrait appears rather morbid, and Madame Requin cannot help noticing this. Camille, on the other hand, believes that the portrait is a great representation of him, even as his mother does her best to hide her perception of the painting. In any case, Camille is so excited about the portrait that he rushes out to get a bottle of champagne to celebrate, leaving Therese and Laurent together. After Camille leaves, Laurent reveals his lust-filled desire for Therese. Right there, an affair begins between the two, who have been fantasizing about each other. Over time, the affair intensifies as the two seize every opportunity to be together. Therese now seems happier and goes about her day with a cheerful spring in her steps, the obvious evidence of her secret sin. Camille, on the other hand, is worried as he notices that Therese is withdrawn from him. He confides in Laurent about his inability to make his wife happy, but his evil friend advises him to simply love her. One day, Camille returns from work with a smile playing around his lips. He tells his wife that they will be leaving Paris to return to their original town, Vernon. Therese is shocked and unhappy about this and tries to convince him to remain in town. However, he insists that they leave Paris as it is better for his health. The air in Paris is polluted and in no way good for him. When Therese protests further, he gets angry and asks that she obeys him, since he is her husband. She slips out that night to meet and tell Laurent about Camille's plan to leave. Laurent brings up the idea of Camille going missing, and Therese, filled with lust for her newfound love interest, mulls over the idea in her mind. Days later, the trio of Laurent, Camille, and Therese take a walk through the woods. While here, Camille gets exhausted and lies down briefly for a brief nap. Afterward, the three of them get on a boat to return home. Hours later, Laurent and Therese return to the dock screaming for help, and Camille missing from the boat. Some of Madame's friends, including Michaud, a police officer, take them home as they grieve. On the ride home, Laurent laments how Camille had apparently begun to dance on the boat, causing it to capsize. They soon get home, and Madame Requin is beside herself with grief. After a long time of searching the river, Camille's missing body is eventually found and he is buried, thus paving the way for the dark love affair to continue. However, things between the two are put on hold. The two evil plotters need to avoid all forms of suspicion from prying eyes. Therese also begins to have nightmares of the fateful afternoon, and Laurent stays away from her as long as possible. Madame Raquin's grief knows no bounds as she blames Therese for the demise of her son, saying she failed in her duty as his guardian angel. One day, Laurent visits Therese in the shop. He speaks about them getting married and having all the properties of Camille, since she was his obvious next of kin. However, Therese tells him that all of Camille's wealth was in his mother's name. After hearing Raquin call for Therese, Laurent immediately asks her if she can pretend to mourn to gain some sympathy with her mother-in-law, hoping she can get some of the inheritance. In the day that follow, friends of Madame Raquin convince her to allow Therese to remarry so she can go ahead with her life. Initially, she objects to this, but her friends make her see why this is necessary. After a while, she agrees to this and asks Therese to marry Laurent, since he was close friends with her deceased son. Of course, Therese initially objects to this, but Laurent quickly agrees and promises to look after her, so the two get married shortly after. During the marriage ceremony, Therese looks at Laurent's neck and sees a scar there, a reminder of what happened the day they conspired to end Camille's life. But not even their happy union does much to calm the growing tension between the two, who are now eaten up by guilt. On their wedding night, Therese demands to know how Camille was, and it is revealed that Laurent attacked his unsuspecting friend. Camille struggled with Laurent, who is holding onto his neck, when he noticed the vice-like grip and coldness in his friend's eyes. Camille was forced to bite Laurent's neck, but the stronger man soon threw him into the water. He struggled for his life, calling out to Therese for help. However, Laurent hit him continuously with the boat's paddle until he sank to the bottom of the water. All the while, Therese closed her eyes. At the end of the horrible story, the two of them do not have any desire for any form of intimacy, even though it is supposed to be their wedding night. One day, as Laurent, Therese, and Madame Raquin recline in a park, the older woman suddenly suffers a stroke which makes her immobile and also affects her speech. As a result, Therese has to take care of her and move her around. Without Raquin's speech, Laurent gets bolder and more careless in his speech. One day, as Therese bathes her mother-in-law, he talks about the day that Camille was. He and Therese get into a fight and they abandon Raquin, who almost drowns in the bathtub. Although she can no longer speak, she can hear their angry voices even as she struggles to stay above the water in the bathtub. Fortunately, Therese returns in time and removes her from the water before she drowns. Days later, Raquin's friends come over for a board game and she begins to scribble on the table. Her friends watch her scribble Therese and Laurent's name. The couple watches in terror as the sick woman tries to finish her writing. Unfortunately, her strength fails her and her arm slumps. Her friends quickly but erroneously conclude that she is trying to appreciate the newlyweds for taking care of her in her sick state. A few days later, Therese attends to a customer and signs off the purchase receipt with the ink from the ink bottle. After the customer leaves, Madame Raquin tries to reach for the ink bottle, but her shaky hand tips it over and it splatters on the floor. Therese returns and after berating her aunt for forcing her into a marriage with her son, leaves her alone and goes off to get drunk. At the pub, Therese gets really drunk and Laurent walks in on his wife fooling around with liquor. After he tries some intimate gesture with her, she kicks him away before storming out of the shop. After this, Laurent leaves and goes to obtain some rat poison from a pharmacist's shop. The next morning, Suzanne, a wife to one of Madame's friends, comes in to check on her. She calls out to the sick woman, but there is no response. She decides to climb upstairs and sees her, but soon freezes when she stumbles on a scribbled ink message on the floor written by the madam with her cane. The message reads, "Therese and Laurent murder." A shocked Suzanne flees the house when she sees this. However, Therese had already heard her voice, so she goes downstairs to see her. She also sees the message on the floor and fear grips her. Therese and Laurent realize that it is only a matter of time before the authorities come for them. This is especially as Suzanne had seen the message on the floor. They take Madame Raquin to a riverside and sit beside her, while Laurent slips the poison he got from the pharmacist into the drink they took with them to the riverside. Therese produces a knife from a piece of cloth. The two of them soon realize that they have plans to take each other's lives and opt to take the poisoned drinks together. They drink the poisoned wine while the crippled Madame Raquin watches them. As they slip into death, the police officers arrive on the scene, but find them long gone. With this, the movie comes to an end. a reflection of what happens when unbridled passion gets the better of anyone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to let us know in the comment section which movie you will want us to recap for you next. Also, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss our next video.